Good afternoon. So I just wanted to, first of all, introduce myself. As he said, Marcin Kleczynski. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Malwarebytes. We're about a 700-person company based out of Santa Clara, California. We have offices here in Estonia as well, just down the street with about 60 people. I'm incredibly humbled to be here in front of you. This is actually my 15th time in Estonia, in Tallinn, believe it or not. You guys have always been such a welcoming city, a beautiful city, and for that, thank you. So I wanted to just tie together entrepreneurship and cybersecurity, something that is very, very passionate to me, by telling you 4 stories. How I became an entrepreneur, how I founded my first company, the worst day of my life, and the day the world changed. So let's start with how I became an entrepreneur. I was born in Łódź, Poland. At the age of 3, my family moved us to Chicago, and that's where I grew up. Shortly after moving to Chicago, my parents actually got divorced. And my mom worked a very low-wage, lower-class job. We lived in this shitty basement in the city of Chicago. She worked at a light factory producing strobe lights that go on the ends of planes. Very manual labor. I rarely saw her. She would pick me up from daycare at the end of the day. But at this factory, she met a man, my stepdad now, and he was the actual general manager. His uncle owned the plant. And he, at night, was an entrepreneur. He would clean the factory and started signing up other clients. I actually learned a lot of how to be an entrepreneur from this guy that my mother had met, who was her boss, and he really taught me a lot of these things. They cleaned offices, and in particular, doctors' offices, which you can't do during the day. Doctors are working during the day, you've got nurses, you've got patients. So the only time to clean an office is actually late in the evening. And at the age of 7, 8, 9, what are my parents to do with me? Well, they take me to work. What is this 7, 8, 9-year-old kid doing at work? Sitting around just causing trouble, right? So my stepdad put me to work. For some reason, these doctors, these nurses, when they stapled paper, they missed a lot of the time. And the staples ended up in the carpet. And we had this shitty vacuum cleaner that could not actually rip out the staples. People stepped on them, they got embedded in the carpet. So my stepdad said, listen, you're causing a lot of trouble. Why don't you go around picking up the staples, and I'll pay you 1 penny for every staple you pick up. So here I am, on my hands and knees, at the age of 7, 8, and 9, picking up these staples that are stuck in this carpet. And that's how I became an entrepreneur. Then my stepdad caught me in one of the side offices with a stapler in my hand, making money a lot faster than I should have. That's how I learned ethics. Shortly thereafter, I resigned from the job. It wasn't paying enough. My parents and I are still on good terms, but that's the story I tell on how I became an entrepreneur. So, how did I start my first company? Well, at the age of 12/13, we had this family computer. My stepdad, we finally had enough money to buy a computer. Those white, shitty Dells that everybody has seen under their desk, right? Windows 95, okay? And I loved video games. As a kid who's that age, who doesn't love video games, right? And I loved pirating video games. As a kid that age, who hasn't pirated video games? We didn't have the money, again, lower class, kind of moving up to middle class. We didn't have the money to actually pay for these video games, my little habit. So I loved to pirate. Kazaa, LimeWire, I'm sure every one of you has pulled a song or two from those services. Unfortunately, as you know, a lot of those services were actually infected with malware, with viruses. I knew nothing about this at the time. I'm this 12, 13-year-old kid just playing around with computers, and suddenly I download a virus. And my mother is furious. She says, you better fix this before Radek comes home, or it's going to be a big problem. So fear of God, my mother instilled in me, fear of God. So here I go, I'm looking around the internet. How the hell do I fix this? I know nothing about it. We had the best antivirus money could pay for. We had a Symantec or a McAfee. Everything you guys have heard of, we had it on that computer. And yet it still got infected with malware, with a virus. And I learned my first lesson there. Even though these companies are so humongous and people trust them and they think they're protected, it took a 12-year-old kid browsing the internet for 5 minutes to get infected. So that was a really eye-opening event. I went online. I did what everybody here would do. I Googled the problem. This is the pop-up I'm having. And this was 2004. This is 2003, 2004. This is when malware used to be lame. This is when malware used to be like that bonsai buddy. Anybody remember the big purple gorilla that would bounce on your screen and try to sell you shit? Yeah, that's how malware used to be. And I'll loop back on that in a minute on how sophisticated some of these threats have gotten. But here I am, infected with some kind of virus. It's throwing up pop-ups. My mom's furious. And I Googled the symptoms, and I found a message board of people, volunteers, that were helping people like me with a problem resolve it for free. So I posted my question. I said, here are the symptoms. I swear, I think I even put, my mother will kill me if this isn't fixed today. And this woman from Belgium reached out on the message board and said, I'm here to help. She handed me a post on the message board that had hundreds of lines. Do this, then do that, run this tool, run that tool. I said, wow, first of all, this is a superhero. This is somebody, a superstar, superhero, somebody that's here to help me, this poor kid online, for free. That didn't even click for me, that these kinds of people exist. Mika, as I found out to be her name, actually still works at the company today. She's our director of threat research. We've known each other for 16 years. I've never met her. So here she is, helping this poor kid on the internet. Gave me 30 pages of instructions to print out. I ran through all of them. I downloaded all these tools, and I finally got the computer back to health before my stepdad actually came home. But I realized, why is it that this takes so many instructions, so many steps to actually solve? And that was the catalyst. I think I can make this better. Why can't we automate these instructions? And that's what I did. Actually, my stepdad, again, you hear me giving him a lot of credit here, but he bought me my first book. It was Visual Basic 6 for Dummies. Those yellow ones that you're very embarrassed reading in public? So, yeah, that was me. I was embarrassed to read that in public. But it taught me how to program, albeit in a language that didn't even exist at the time anymore, but still learned how to program. And I built my first product or piece of software that helped automate these processes because I wanted to be a superhero too. I thought I could be that superhero. So that's what I did. And after a couple of these tools that I published, somebody reached out to me and said, listen, you're building some really cool stuff. Why don't I just, again, another superhero, why don't I give you this website, malwarebytes.biz? I said, well, that's a terrible name. Too late now, it's on the building, so we got to kind of keep it. But this is the thing. These people rallied around me. They really were just these genuine people on the internet that I found in the corner of the internet through a problem that who would have thought I would ever have? And again, the co-founder, that Bruce Harrison, I'll tell you a little bit about my co-founder. Bruce Harrison was this middle-aged guy, 35, 40, living in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts, near Boston, divorced, 2 kids. He worked at a tech repair shop, and he would drive, an hour each way just to work at this tech repair shop, cleaning up computers of viruses. That was their number one job. That was all that was happening every single day. And guess what? All of these computers that he was cleaning up had an antivirus on it. And he saw the problem too. He would always come to our website, now that we had created one, and came to me personally and said, listen, your software is great, it's detecting this stuff, but it's missing this stuff. And after a couple of rounds of that, I said, this guy knows what he's doing. Let's go build an antivirus together. So it was so anticlimactic. I just messaged him. I said, let's go build an antivirus together. He just said, sure. As anticlimactic as that was the founding of Malwarebytes. And so we started working together. I went to high school, I went back home, hung out with some friends, then went to code. Imagine telling your mother, when you're age 14, that you're working with this 35-year-old guy on the internet, building an antivirus. It's not fun. Imagine being this 35-year-old guy, telling your ex-wife and your family, you're working with this 14-year-old kid on the internet, building an antivirus. We actually hadn't met each other until we had made our first $1 million. We barely talked on the phone. All of this was done through email. All of this was done through chat. And when we finally met each other in Chicago at an event, it was just like, hey, dude, what's up? Like nothing had ever happened. All right, very quickly, my last co-founder I met through just, again, you guessed it, superhero on this message board. And I reached out to him. He was a PhD in physics, and he just enjoyed programming. He actually left his PhD program before submitting his thesis and licensed some of his software to us. And at some point, the amount of money that we were paying him was so crazy, he said, I can't do this, I need to just become a partner, because this looks like drug money we were basically paying him. In August of 2000, so January 2008, we launched the first version of the product, and through this community, we became what I would believe to be a superhero at the time, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But people were downloading it frantically. We started getting traction with consumers. We started getting traction with businesses. And in August, just 8 months later, I'm due at the University of Illinois for a computer science degree. I'm due down there, and that's the conundrum. The company is doing so well, what the hell do I do? Well, that was easy. My mother kicked my ass, drove me down there personally, and said, you're not leaving here till you graduate. So that's what I did. 4.5 years later, I actually graduated. My favorite story at the University of Illinois is, as I'm a freshman, going into sophomore year, I'm disassembling a virus on my computer in my dormitory, because that's the cool thing kids do those days, right? And all of a sudden, a white page comes up that says, network activity detected. We've blacklisted your computer from the network. Please call this number. Okay, let's try this out. So I call the help desk. A kid no older than I shows up at my door and says, I need to inspect your computer for viruses. Be my guest. Sits down at my computer. Lo and behold, he runs Malwarebytes right in front of me. I'm just standing there, yeah, looks great. To this day, he has no idea. And that is my favorite story. So the company was founded. Here we are, we're superheroes. Now let me tell you about the worst day of my life. This happened, I believe, early 2013. It was rare for me to be at the office. It was rare for Bruce to be at the office. I was still commuting from Chicago. University of Illinois, had just graduated, moved to Chicago. He was a loner. He really liked to work from home. His team was all remote. Our threat researchers, we hire wherever we can find the best talent. I'm in a meeting, and Bruce walks in, and he looks the whitest I've ever seen him. It looked like he was sick. I actually asked him, are you ill? Some context behind what we do. So we run on the endpoint. We run on your computer, whether it's a Windows, whether it's a Mac, whether it's an Android device. And we are more proactive against threats. The traditional antivirus companies, they find a piece of malware or virus, they fingerprint it, and they ship those fingerprints to all their customers. Works great in theory, but when those criminals get pretty sophisticated and realize that all they have to do is change the code every day or every instance, it doesn't work so well. So we started doing it algorithmically from the very beginning. Now, we still push these algorithms down to the endpoint. We train on new models. We do this about 20 times a day. And the worst thing that can happen to a company like ours is we detect a file that isn't malicious as malicious. And more importantly, we detect a file that isn't malicious as malicious, and it's a system-critical file. And that's what we did. We have all these QA processes in place. We have all this testing that goes into it. We do this 20 times a day. What could go wrong? Well, the end of the world could go wrong. We pushed out an update to all of our customers. By then, we had thousands of businesses using the product. And in 8 minutes, we destroyed 1 million computers. And here I am, thinking I'm a superhero, saving the world. But I'm a big fucking loser, because we just destroyed 1 million computers in 8 minutes. Emergency services, completely offline. Hospitals couldn't access patient data. And that's all it took. It took 8 minutes to destroy that. And our reputation went back 2 to 3 years. Now look, my team actually rallied around me. They saw the funk that I was in. Engineers started calling customers. Engineers should never talk to customers. Engineers started talking to customers. They explained how to fix the problem, what happened, why it will never happen again. And I actually think we went into crisis mode and came out of it stronger than ever. The team really rallied around each other. So that was the worst day of my life. And let me tell you, my final story is really the day the world changed. And when I I've been doing cybersecurity half my life. That's not that long, I guess, but half my life I've been doing cybersecurity. When I started, it was Bonsai Buddy. It was the dumb gorilla, ape, whatever, running around the screen with pop-ups and financial incentive, and pretty harmless. Last year, I don't know if any of you saw WannaCry, which was one of the biggest ransomware attacks that happened in the world. And just to give some context as well, so let's start with ransomware. Ransomware is a type of virus that infects the computer. It encrypts the files on the computer with military-grade encryption and then asks for a ransom, very akin to kidnapping a child and saying, I want $1,000. It does it in Bitcoin. Sometimes these files obviously aren't backed up, so if you're working on a PhD thesis, what do you do if you don't have Dropbox? You might pay the ransom. So WannaCry, and the interesting thing about WannaCry was it was delivered via an exploit. So many of you think, hey, if I click an email, open an email and maybe click on a link and get it infected, that sucks. Or if I see a social media post, I accidentally download something, blah, 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 right? Well, with exploits becoming more prevalent, and an exploit's just a vulnerability in a common piece of software that lets something happen. In this instance, all the user had to do was be running Microsoft Windows and not have it patched, which was actually pretty common, and didn't have to click on anything, didn't really have to do anything, and they were infected with ransomware. So the files were all encrypted. Now, that's fine and dandy. Some people have backups. If it's just your home computer, that's fine. But when it happens to some of the biggest companies in the world, and more specifically the NHS in the UK, and patient lives are at risk, that's when it starts getting scary. So my moment of enlightenment, maybe not the world changing, but my moment of enlightenment came last year when I realized that these criminals had no regard for human life. Bonsai Buddy mutated to, I just don't really care if people die. And I claim that actually, if it hasn't already happened, in my lifetime, we will see human casualties due to cybercrime, and potentially in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And so my ask is as follows. I think this profession is increasingly in demand, and there's actually a huge shortage of cybersecurity professionals, cybersecurity heroes in the world. And if I could just leave this stage having convinced one of you to join the cybersecurity profession, this talk would have been worth it. Thank you.